Good morning. We are in Mittler Rebbe's Maimer at Moram Tzoi. We are at on page 407, middle of 407. So let's sum up what we're learning. So maybe I should do this at the beginning. So this class is dedicated in loving memory of Ariel ben Avram Haruni, Zachreinu Livracha, Hashem Yimkam Damai. So our learning is in his honor. We are discussing Torah, the pasuk ner mitzvah v'Torah. What is v'Torah? And quite elaborately, we can say, the Mittler Rebbe is developing the idea that we learned in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, which I reviewed yesterday, at least in some. What is Torah? So he says, Oyer means that it illuminates. But what is it illuminating? It's illuminating God's plan, if you wish, God's will, God's wisdom, God's direction. That's what Torah is. The Rebbe's most common expression, I mentioned this a number of times, more repeated than any other expression in his Farbrengens, was Torah Meloshen Heira'ah. Torah from the word directive, guidance, the guidebook, Heira'ah, which interestingly is also from the word Heira'ah. Eiraisa in Aramaic, the Zayar says, is Yaisa. It brings light. So Torah and light are synonymous in the sense that Torah, as the Rebbe would very often state it in very simple terms, even when he spoke to children, that we live in a dark world, you're on a dark road. Torah is the illuminating light that shines and shows us the way to live our lives in the divine way, exactly as God wants us to be, in the healthiest possible way. That's in a very basic Balbatisha expression. On a deeper level, Torah reflects the Oyer as it is, divine Oyer, undiluted, untouched, unblemished, unaffected by the tzimtzum. So it's the purest thing. If you want to get a picture of what God wants of anything, or of God himself, frankly, not just of what God wants, that's where you look into Torah. And that's the gift of Torah. However, Torah doesn't remain in that level. It comes down into existence. That's the gift that is part of our lives. It's something we can read, we can relate to, we can understand. Obviously, it has depths upon depths, and as far as you go, like we said, it's infinite, the Torah. It's unlimited. But that unlimited comes down into a world of limitations and definitions, as he said. From the L'mayla Midah comes into the Kav HaMidah, and it provides us with a structure and measurement, and it's in a measured state, as he said. Torah is Nikra Kav Shemedet Kol Medida. Torah Nitna B'Shiyurim V'Gvulim. The bottom of page 407. Okay, now on page 407, bottom of 406. Sorry, the top of page 407. He began what we learned yesterday. What is the root and the reason that Torah is this way? Because Torah, like the Kav, is a revealer. It reveals Megala L'chol Chinas Hester Behelam Decheshach Sisrei. Reveals the cover, that which is covered and concealed in Cheshach Sisrei. Yoshas Cheshach Sisrei. God placed himself within concealment. Torah is a revealer. Without Torah, all of it would be, or much of it would be concealed. And then he continued, and even the Torah Chachma Geduma, which means Chachma as it was part of Hashem, like we said, Sheisa Omen, Mutzno Mufla. We're talking about the Torah as it was as it was with God before existence even began. It was completely Mutzna, concealed and covered up, and wondrous. That too, Nigla Be'er Torah HaNiglas Lanu. That was revealed to us with the Torah that was given to us. Makala Mukis Min Cheshach. Gam LaEmek the Emek Shebehelam the Atzmis Ein Sof. So that is Torah. So Torah is Torah Eir. It's a Torah of light. That's the root of why it's called Kav Amida. When it comes into existence, that's the root of it. And now we continue the next piece, what we began learning. Let's go over this carefully and slowly, because he's introducing a new concept here. He says, why does Torah Tak have that ability to do that? And just I'm just amplifying the question by comparing it to other wisdom. Wisdom in general is an illuminating element. When you think of science, whether it's mathematics or physics or botany or astronomy or whatever it may be, what is a science essentially? It's an illuminating intelligence that illuminates the facts and dissects the anatomy of whatever it is that you're looking at. In other words, if you looked at something and you did not have that scientific knowledge or knowledge in general, you would just see it at face value. The fact that you can use your mind helps reveal what's the makeup, what's its chemistry, what makes it tick. And then we can tap into it and develop technologies as we've done and we're doing. So really every wisdom is a form of Oir. However, there's a difference between regular wisdom and Torah wisdom. We already learned this earlier as well, I believe in Ayin Beis, as well as the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. And what he's going to say briefly here, what I'm saying briefly, what he's going to say, I'm saying it briefly right now, is that the Chochmah of Torah is the level of Ayin. Like we say, Chochmah ma'ayin to Motzah. Chochmah comes from Ayin. A level of Ayin means the opposite of Yesh. So let me elaborate a bit more about that, and I'll sum up what we've learned here. Well, first let me sum up, and then I'll elaborate. It should be the other way around. The Fisha B'chinas Chochmah the Torah nikra koyach ma. Chochmah is called koyach ma, made up of two words. Chochmah koyach ma, the power of what? And what is ma? Ma is the concept of bittul. Bli muhus. We say mazeh. Bli muhus dover. Mashabilti nira liyesh bedover ma klal. So it's something that doesn't have any substance. I'll explain in a moment how that relates to Chochmah, but that's what he's saying. Therefore, al kain ein dover master klal mitzamtzim klal. Liyesh b'chinas habittul mitziyas betachlis. That's why there doesn't have Chochmah, something that does not have anything that covers or conceals it. Because what is it concealing? Its very entity is not made up of substance that you can conceal, as we've discussed yesterday. And he compares it. Who do we find is this level of Ma? Moshe. And Aaron to some extent. Shenemar, v'anachnu ma. The truth is it says v'nachnu ma. But in some places it says v'anachnu. In some Maimorim it quotes as v'anachnu, but it says in the pasuk v'nachnu ma. V'Aaron mahu. We are nobody. Why? What do you want? We are not entities of substance. And that's what Torah is. Stripped of, completely devoid of. The called b'chinas yesh betachlis. Like we say, mashmoy. They say in the mashmoy to mishlei, not to shmois. It makes more sense. Mashmoy, mashem b'noi in the mishlei. Mashmoy means what's his name? There's no what definition does he have? What description does he have? Ulakach ein primius v'atzmus deira and sof sheira. The primius and atzmus and deira and sof, which is also beyond all structure. It does not dwell only in one place. Rak b'chinas ayin and a chin of ayin of Torah, and that's why it's called koyach ma the chochmah the Torah dafke. Kameshikos Hashem kanoni reishis darke. That's where we stopped. So I wanted to just add a little explanation about this ayin. I've said this a number of times, but it fits here as well to repeat and review again. We've talked. When we talk about intelligence, what is intelligence? Most people think intelligence is what's uniquely be endowed to the human race, that we have a mind. Well, animals also have mind, but we have a unique type of mind that's able to transcend emotional subjectivity, that's able to analyze and dissect and process, and is able to understand things more than what we just see at the face value. Intelligence. The more intelligent a person is, the more they understand the forces that define existence and define ourselves, define everything. Whatever that wisdom may be. If it's wisdom of mathematics, it's in that area. If it's wisdom of medicine. If it's wisdom of law, okay. Chassidus, and of course based on Kabbalah and the Torah in general, explains that wisdom, intelligence was created by God. It's not just a given that we have wisdom. And it was given to us in order for us to experience a reality beyond ourselves. In other words, if we only had emotions and we were driven by our emotional impulses, which we are even with our minds, but if it was exclusively that, a person would never be able to really go beyond their own needs. Everything would be defined in terms of what is in it for me, how I feel about it. The mind has the power to imagine, the power to marvel, has the ability to go beyond our own selves and experience a reality greater than ourselves, which is in language of Chassidus, Kabbalah Chassidus, is that Chachma ma'ayin timotze, the Chachma, which is the beginning of all wisdom. From Chachma it goes into Bina and then into Das, but the beginning is that Chachma is able to look, so to speak, then gaze at a reality beyond itself, and that's the Ayin, the Keser of the Ayin of Keser. That's where we feel an idea falls into our mind. We have a flash of an idea. Where did it come from? We actually say, Maza. Where did it come from? What is this exactly? Because we sense it's coming from a greater place. So in other words, the real point of Chachma is to evoke a sense of awe, a sense of Bittul, to something beyond ourselves. It's in the form of intelligence, but it's not intelligence per se, because you could have a person who's intelligent that is also arrogant. But the true nature of intelligence, it's not about you. It's about the idea and the concept that you're conceiving or that you are, that's entering into you. That's why many people will say, it came to me. It was like I channeled it. Not mine. I don't own these ideas. So even the most innovative concept, it came so, where did it come from? So we call it Chachma Stima. Well, bottom line, it's something from beyond us. So essentially, Chachma becomes the channel, the interface between the divine, super rational, and the rational. Because Seichel becomes the bridge between that which is beyond us and that which we can then internalize. Because then from Chachma, we can then begin to understand it and develop it in Bina and so on. So this is a topic that we've learned in Ayin Beis quite a few times. I've discussed it many times. And that's why it plays such a central role, Chachma, that bridge between Keser, Makif, if you wish, and Pnimi. It's the beginning. Reishis Chachma, everything starts from Chachma in that sense. Beginning of consciousness. So consciousness is coming from a superconscious place, which in turn is drawing down from the Elokus, divine. Okay, so with that, just adding a little explanation here, why Torah. So the ultimate Chachma is Torah. When you learn Chachmas Chitzenius, which means Chachmas Ha'elam, human intelligence, scientific wisdom, and so on, there you could also have Bittul, but you could also be arrogant, because you're learning about existence. And you're learning about existence, so it says in some Maimonic Siddhas, the more you learn about existence, the more of a Yesh, because you're becoming even wiser about the Yesh. Torah is the exact opposite. Torah is teaching you about God. It's teaching not about you. It's not coming to dissect you and what you are. Even though in Torah you have human Chochmas HaChaim, intelligence that can help us understand human beings, but essentially it's really understanding God. And therefore it's not about you. So Torah itself is a Bittul Dika reality, because Torah is the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, which he will speak about soon. He already mentioned it earlier, briefly. But bottom line is Torah is that ultimate, the quintessential Ayin. And thus, he says, it's not subject to Tzimtzum and Hela. Because it has no substance. It has no entity. You can conceal something that is an entity. But if Torah is completely Bottul Telekus, like he says, has no Metzias at all, ain't a Nitfas Metzias Dava Klau, so therefore, it's always fundamentally in a state of Oyer, Torah Oyer. It's a state of Gilui, a state of revelation, a state of doesn't have anything concealed, because all it is just an expression of the divine will and divine wisdom. So just adding a little explanation to this topic. Now, I'm sure there's more that can be said and maybe explained in different ways. I just wanted to use this because this is the theme that we have talked about quite a few times. So this continues to explain what Torah the Torah. And the more we learn this, the more it'll set the stage to understand the difference between Ner Mitzvah and Torah. Just stating that because we know that's where he's going to ultimately come back to, because that's where he started. We started the whole topic. He started on page 402, this topic of Torah in contrast to Ner Mitzvah. But let's continue now reading inside, page 407, unless someone has a question. I'm happy to address. Now we will read from the line Yesh Darke, around, 3, 6, like 11 lines from the top of page 407. Pages can be found at ayinbase.com if you want to follow the text. So he says now like this, and even though the wisdom of Torah is nothing but a reflection, a light and a reflection, like we say, it's not moir, it's not the source of light, it's light, it's the light of Hashem, or the light, the divine light, So he's not trying to minimize it. He's just saying that we just spoke about Torah in such a lofty and high level way. So even though just Mikol Mokim, but Zeh, in this Liyese b'bchinas Ayin. And let me just add something before I continue. So in a way, when we learn about we learn, yes, is completely nothing but a reflection of its source, as opposed to Yesh. A Yesh is a self-contained entity with its own consciousness and own independent awareness. Is completely a reflection of its source. That's true. On the other hand, we learn that is only a reflection. It doesn't have any substance of its own, which is also what he's saying here as well. It's Ayin, but meaning that it's not the Etzem, it's an of the Etzem. So its Maila is also the fact that it doesn't really have any entity at all. All it is a reflection. And in that sense, it's not the source, it's not the Etzem, it's not the Moed. Makol Mokim, nevertheless, Ba'ir Zeh, and I'll add one more thing, sorry. And then in some places we learned that Oyer is also Shalei Be'erech to the Moed. God is not defined by Oyer. So he's not saying that here, because we're talking about Torah. You could also say that Oyer is not, God has a lot more about him than just being a source of light. So I don't know if that included in the Afal Pi. I just wanted to mention it. The Kol Mokim, nevertheless, but Oyer Zeh, in this light, Liyese b'chinas Ayin, being in a state of Ayin, and the brackets actually changes the word from Ayin to Ein Sof. So, we say Ayin means like nothingness. Bittul, Ein Sof means it has no end. So the Ayin is not really nothing, it's really no end. So I guess the bracket, the second manuscript where it includes Sof, changes somewhat the pshat here. Doesn't change the fundamental understanding of what we're reading here, but it's interesting. Because Bechinas Ayin makes sense because that's what we've been learning till now. Ein Sof also makes sense because it's the Torah is Ein Sof, like we said, without measure. But just interesting how you can say Bechinas Ayin or you can say Bechinas Ein Sof. V'nikra koyach ma mamish. Like we said before, it's called koyach ma, chochma koyach ma, power of ma, bittul. Mushlal, umufshet, which means it negates and defies, and stripped and completely removed from mekol b'chinas yesh b'tachlis, from utterly, from any form of yesh, meaning any form of identity or substance, being that that's this level of oyer, of Torah oyer, that's this level of ayin or ein sof blima, therefore, bezeh dafke yochel lishken by gile oyer the ein sof atzmei, shenikra ayina amiti. That's why. So on one hand, it's only a light, it's only like a reflection, but because it has no substance of its own, that's why it can be the channel in which resides, in which dwells, Lishkin, Gile the Ein Sof Atzmei. The pure level of Ein Sof itself, of the Ein Sof Atzmei, which is called the Ayin Amiti. So now he's calling Torah Ayin, Torah and it's like, it doesn't say the word Keli, but in it can be Lishkin, Ein Sof, which is Ayin Amiti, but then he adds, Oy Yesh Amiti, or Yesh Amiti, which is even higher than the Ayin Amiti. I'll explain the difference in a moment. Shalamayla mebchinas Yesh b'dover ma, that is higher. Both Ayin Amiti and Yesh Amiti are higher than a Yesh b'dover ma, as we know it, something of substance of the Yesh of existence. Ad she'ena nitfis b'shum hasogim. Let me read one more line, and then I'll come back and explain. To the point that the Torah is not nitfis, is not graspable, it's not contained. With any comprehension and thought. The less machshava. Like it says, no thought can grasp him at all. Because the Ayin Amiti or the Yesh Amiti is higher than any type of machshava, and it's not graspable, al kain ein shayre rak b'chinas ma be'etzem k'chochma de Torah. And that's why it's not does not dwell anywhere except in something that is ma be'etzem. Notice, if you want to have that type of level that's beyond any type of identity, you need something that has no identity, and that's Torah. So if you read this, it's a little different than what I explained earlier. That's why I was looking yesterday, where he said, because Torah has no mitzias, so nothing can conceal it. There I was explaining, since there's nothing there, how could it be concealed? It's fundamentally Bottul. Here he's saying not a different pshat, but you could say an additional point, that he's saying that the only way that real ma of the Ayin Amiti, Yesh Amiti, true, what he calls Gili Ein Sof Atzmei, which is higher than any form of Yesh, can only be channeled through something that's complete Ayin, which is Torah. And then he says, we spoke yesterday about whether this is Mamayla Lamata or through Avodah. Now he does introduce, Oy b'chinas Bittul dema ba'anova v'shiflas v'nemichas ruach, or through the Bittul of ma that comes through humility, and a person who feels that they are selfless, because here shifless and nemichas ruach does not mean the negative, like as in low self-esteem or lack of self-sense, a lack of self-value, but rather a lack of ego, essentially. To the point that he does not feel himself as an entity at all. Like Moshe, who is the humblest of all human beings. And like also an Ani V'Shval Ruach, Ani means literally a poor person, but he means here Ani V'Shval Ruach means someone who feels that they are bereft, that they have nothing of their own. So that becomes a keli as well, to channel the highest levels of Elokus that are beyond Yesh. Okay, I mean, there's more to say because I'm in the middle of a sentence. I just want to go back. I don't want to go too far without explaining what's this Ayin Amiti and Yesh Amiti. And he doesn't really explain it. He just says it. So let me just tell you my thought on that, and then I'll stop if anybody wants to ask anything. So based on what we learned earlier, what I'm just going to say now is based on what we learned earlier. You remember we learned there's two levels of Yesh, Yesh Amiti, Yesh Anivra. And then there's an Ayin Be'emtza. Always between the Yesh Amiti, there's the Ayin, which is Ur. And then he continued and said, an Ayin itself, there's two levels. The Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, which is the Ur, that is only an expression of the divine. It doesn't relate to existence. And the Ayin of the Yesh Anivra, which God wanted a level of light that would be measured and tailored and relate to existence. The Ayin of Ashayach L'Nivroim is the way it was expressed. And these two levels of Ayin are two levels. In Ayin Beis, close to the end, he spoke why are they two, why are they not one? Because God wanted both of them. So the Ayin Amiti is the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti. That's Oir. That's Bottul to the Yesh Amiti. The Yesh Amiti is Atzmus, is the source itself. I mean, that's what we're talking about now. Yesh Amiti and Ayin Amiti. Here, when he says Ayin Amiti or Yesh Amiti, what it seems like he's saying is that since Torah is completely Bottul, like Ayin, Mamish, Ma, Chochma, Koyach, Ma, complete Ayin, that's why Yochel Lishkin Boy, within it can reside what? The pure Ein Sof, that's the Ayin Amiti of the Yesh Amiti. So this would mean that there's like two levels. There's the Ayin Amiti, is the Ein Sof, Mamish, Lifnei Tzimtzum, before any Tzimtzum affects it. And that where can it be found? In Torah. Because Torah is also Ayin. That necessarily means that there are two levels, but it's two descriptions. First we talk about the and then we talk about the within Torah. But he says, Yesh Amiti, there you could say, saying that Torah and the Ayin Amiti maybe are all one level. And therefore, what is it, what is Sheda in it? Yesh Amiti. Not just the highest level of Ayin, but also the highest level of the source itself, Atzmus itself, Yesh Amiti. And why is he saying both ways? Because probably you can explain it both ways. Maybe it's two levels in Torah. With Torah is mamish one with Yesh Amiti, like a Raisa v'Kutshabricha Kulachad. Then there's Torah as it manifests in Torah There I'm already speculating now, which without any basis. It's possible that it could be what I just said, Torah as it is in the Etzem and Torah as it comes into but that is already not 100% clear. It could be a way of explaining why he says Oy. I just wanted to explain that expression. Okay, bottom line is that the Torah, because it's Bottul, so even though it's only Oir and a reflection, because he definitely says that's Oir Ha'ara, yet because it's completely substanceless and it says shapeless and also seamless. Yeah, it doesn't have any identity of its own. So therefore, it is Sheda Ein Sof Ba'atzmei, the Ayin Amiti or the Yesh Amiti. And the same is true to the point. Since Helakus is less machshavet tfisa beklal, so the only place ein sheda only in something which is ma be'etzem. Like he said earlier, in different words, he said ein pnimis be'atzmas dein sof sheda rak b'chinas ayin, only in the level of ayin. Okay, or in the bittul of an onav of humility. Which is not a contradiction, because Moshe, Zichru Teres Moshe Avdi, Moshe was Kulei Teira, everything about him was Teira. So as a person, he was the humblest person, like we said before, Nachnu Ma, Ana B'Chalada, V'chein Ani V'Shva Ruach L'Kahai Gavna. But we still have to still not finish this topic. I just will stop here in case anybody wants to clarify anything. Okay.
What does it mean that the Torah is a Oyer V'Ziv? Raisa v'Kotshabrichu Kol Chad. This is Chochmosei Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu.
So first of all, since when is Chochmosei Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu not Oyer? That could also be Oyer. Secondly, the pasuk says Torah Eir. It doesn't say Torah Moyer. It says Torah Eir. He brings that clear, befedish. Torah is Torah of light.
But that's not Chad. That's not Chad. Raisa v'Kotshabrichu.
Why not? Eir is Chad with the Moyer. Eir is Dovik and Chad is completely Bottul and completely one with the Moyer. Why can't you say that?
Because we know that it's Bottul, Take, but it's Ritzoini. It's not the Moyer.
Ritzoini is not him either. Ritzoini is still a level. As soon as you say anything, it's not him alone. So right away you say, so.
And also what you said, he's saying.
And secondly, I didn't even want to mention it again, but I will mention it. Is not what he's speaking about right here, per se, even though he mentioned it clearly. He said, he said. That's so. We don't. The level of Araisa Kutshabricha Kulachad can be explained in many ways. It could be explained like I just said, that that's what it means. Oyer of Torah is one with Eibishter. Also, you could say there's two levels in Torah. There's Torah as it is one with Atzmus, and then you don't even call it Torah. You wouldn't even say Araisa v'kudshebicha kul echad. Then there's only one Atzmus. And then there's Torah as it manifests in something that is called Torah. At the end of the day, you cannot deny the fact that the Eibishter gave us a Torah. And the Torah could be Esi Atam Leichim, and the Torah is Anon Nafshi Ksavis Yehavis. It has the whole etzem in there. But it's still, you don't call Torah, you don't say Torah is the creator. The Eibishter is the Eibishter. The Eibishter gave us Torah. However you twist or turn it, you're going to end up having to say that there is something besides the Eibishter called Torah. That Torah is one with the Eibishter. Completely Bottul, like he's saying here. Regardless, he clearly is talking about Torah as it manifests in Eir. Whether there's higher levels in Torah, that I said I don't want to speculate here because he's not discussing it. But he clearly says, Ayin Amiti, Yesh Amiti. So you can see from that itself that there's levels. And bottom line is being that Torah illuminates. Eir is an illuminator. We know the Eibishter is not defined by Eir. But regardless, the Torah, the way it manifests, even as Eir, is completely Bottul Ma.
Rabbi Jacobson, in volume 2, we remember there was a discussion of the cloth, and then there was the otiot, the letters of Torah. Why can't we say that the cloth, that obviously we don't understand, is the or of Torah that as it relates to Hashem, and then the letters, it's the or that relates to existence?
I don't know. I'd have to see inside if that relates to.
It was volume 2, I believe, that we discussed it. I remember he was talking about the keli, the inside of the keli versus the outside, the liquid. You know what I mean? The whole that whole discussion.
Firstly, he talked about it also in volume 1. We talked about spheres from the word sefer, and can you say it? I'd have to see inside to see if those are correspond to these levels. It's possible. Or it's lower levels. It's more likely as soon as you speak about letters, the more likely you're talking about lower levels here. He was talking about there's no kalim yet, there's no oisius even. So it's most likely what you're describing is in lower levels, not in the higher levels.
But the cloth itself should be the higher level. That's what I'm saying. That's the or, because obviously we cannot decipher.
Not necessarily.
Not okay.
I have a question related to what Rabbi.
Sorry, I didn't finish. Then George came in. He's saying יוכל לשכון בו גילוי אור אינסוף שנקרא עין אמיתי או יש אמיתי שלמעלה מבחינת יש. So he's calling it גילוי אור the Ein Sof, and you explained, Reb Simon, that Yesh Amiti is higher than Ayin Amiti, which is not a.
Right. So I explained it, yeah.
We can't hear you, Rabbi Taitel.
Well, the word Shalamayla
question.
Yes Bedover Ma, I think applies both to Ayin Amiti and Yesh Amiti, just for the record.
Okay, but is Lamailo from Gilui Oyer the Ein Sof. Yesh Amiti is Atzmos.
So Torah is, because of its bittul, in it is Sheda Ayin Amiti or the Yesh Amiti, and I just explained what those two, how the difference between the two.
Yeah, but he said, okay, it's a good explanation.
What are you asking?
No, because he said, Yuchal Lishkoin Boy Gilui Oyer.
I just explained that. Are you asking a question or you're?
No, I'm asking. No, I'm asking that Yesh Amiti is the Milo Megilui Oyer.
So Torah is because of its bittul, it is shada in it, either the Ayin Amiti of Ein Sof Mamish Ayin of Yesh Amiti or Yesh Amiti. What's the problem with that?
Okay, which means that is Lemailo Mei Oyer.
That's Yesh Amiti is higher than Ayin Amiti, yeah.
Yeah. And what does it mean that Bittul without Chochma is nothing is shared. You need also the Chochma of Torah.
Chochma is Bittul, and Chochma of Torah embodies, personifies Bittul. Koyach
Thank you.
ma.
Sorry, Rabbi Yitzchok. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, my question is very similar to yours. Maybe it's the same question. He's saying that he's talking about Torah is either the Ayin Amiti or Yesh Amiti. So, but the Yesh Amiti is Atzmus. Torah.
He didn't say Torah is Ayin Amiti or Yesh Amiti. He said Torah is a place where Ayin Amiti and Yesh Amiti are Sheira in Torah. Just for the record, that's what he says.
Okay. Well, that answers my question.
Okay. Good. So, I'll just say one more thing that may be helpful here. There are many Maimarim Chassidus that talk about Torah, of course, and the relationship between Torah and the Eibishter, like we said, Raisa v'Kudsha Brichu Kul Echad. But you're not going to find many Maimarim that go through exactly what level is which. So, for example, if you ask the question, what's the difference between Eir Ein Sof and Torah Eir? Is that the same level or not the same level? I've always wondered this. For almost over 50 years, I've been thinking about that. And I never found anywhere that actually talks about it. So I was always under the understanding was like this. There's Atzmus, the Eibishter. He wanted to express himself, so he created a field of energy called expression. Eir. Eir is Mitzias Nimtza. Torah is a revelation of his innermost, you can say, plan, wisdom, idea, whatever you want to call it. It's hard to really find words for it. Since Eir is God's way of expression, so Torah is therefore naturally Eir. But Eir is also going to be the force that will ultimately be the creative force that creates existence. But Torah is also part of that because it's Takal Baraisa Bara Alma. Torah is the blueprint. So without really knowing how to distinguish the nuances, clearly they're both very, very go hand in hand. Here is for the first time I've seen a Maimer where he actually identifies and says that Torah, because of its bittul, it's shade, and it is shade the Ein Sof Atzmei. That means Torah is the place where Eir of Ein Sof literally dwells, and like he says, Shenikra Ayin Amiti or Yesh Amiti. Now, what's he referring to when he says Shenikra? So the Pashas Ayin Amiti for sure would be Eir the Ein Sof Atzmei. The question is Yesh Amiti referring to Eir the Ein Sof Atzmei or the source of Eir the Ein Sof Atzmei? So I was interpreting it that it cannot be Eir the Ein Sof because Yesh Amiti. However, Torah is because of its bittul, it's also in it is Sheira Yesh Amiti. That's how I was explaining it. You could technically read it differently and say that the Gilead of Ein Sof Atzmei is either called Ayin Amiti or called Yesh Amiti. That would force us then to go ahead and try to explain how Eir the Ein Sof Atzmei has a level called Yesh Amiti. It's easier to just say Yesh Amiti is referring to the source and not Eir. But you could explain it that way. So, being that it's so brief, it's hard to really say anything definitively. That's why what I said, I feel very comfortable and to take responsibility of the ideas. But it's still not 100% exactly defined of exactly the process. Because you could argue, does Torah precede Eir Ein Sof? Since the Raisa v'Kudsha Brichu Kul Echad, you could say Torah connects with Atzmus even before Eir, or Lav Dafke. Maybe the very concept of anything besides Atzmus is only possible once you talk about Eir. But then there's the concept of Yechelas Atzmus, and I'm not even getting into Neshamas, where Neshamas fit into this whole thing. And how deep does that go? Is that an Eir? Is it higher than Eir? We usually say that Neshamas are Mushash and Atzmus Mamish. So all this requires plenty of discussion. Oh, this and Israel Kodmul Torah, right? Correct. So the question really is where all this belongs in the map. I don't want to say anything here definitively because I don't have exact sources. I have a certain hergish of how it works. Definitely there's Atzmus is above all. That's no question, because there's only one Eibishter. Atzmus then endowed, so to speak, or I don't want to say created, but there's something in Atzmus that he imparted into Torah and into Neshamis, and of course into Oir. Now, Oir, I think, is the carrier of everything. Oir is basically God's way of expressing anything. So whether it's Torah, Neshamis, or Oir Ein Sof, as it goes through the levels before the Tzimtzum and all the way to the Tzimtzum and so on, is ultimately just synonymous with the word divine expression. Expression is a very broad word. What is he expressing? That depends. He could be expressing Torah, he could be expressing the Shamas, he could be expressing something else. The spheres that he wants to create. So that's what I would say about this. More than that, I cannot really say definitively. Maybe as we continue learning, things will get a little clearer, but it is something I think about, so it's not like I'm ignoring it. It's just that there's only that much you can really derive from what is said here. And, from there on, everybody here can weigh in whatever their opinions and thoughts on it. But I don't see more that can be drawn out from what he says here than what I've said right now. As I said, from here on, you can discuss the different ways of explaining it. I'm not denying that there are many ways you can explain it, but that's what I wanted to just say about this.
On your question, first of all, that was extremely helpful. Those are the kinds of questions I was wondering. On the issue of what do we make of this reference to Yesh Amiti, or no, on your question about whether Torah or is the same as the Or Ein Sof, maybe this goes to the issue of the two different types of Or Eloki, which is one is the Or that is Noga but Tzimtzum, which is Or Ein Sof, I think, is ultimately affected by the Tzimtzum. That's the whole point of the Tzimtzum, versus Torah, or that aspect which is not Noga but Tzimtzum, not affected. So maybe that's what he means here by it. It's Shura, the Yesh Amiti.
No, I would not say that at all. No. Because Torah, no matter how, is always a light that is not affected by the Tzimtzum. He's not discussing the Tzimtzum here at all. Here he's definitely talking either the Oir that's completely beyond Tzimtzum, but it's Oir, or he's talking about the Yesh Amiti, which would be the source itself. My question is whether the Yesh Amiti maybe he's talking about the deepest level of Oir. I don't think that's the case. But I don't think you can apply it to the two levels of Oir we learned earlier.
Okay. It's just a shot.
As far as Oir Torah and Oir Ein Sof, here he clearly says that Torah is not Oir Ein Sof. Torah is a place where, because of its bittul, in it is Sheira, ain't a Sheira, rak b'bchinas ma be'etzem the Torah. In other words, Yochel Lishken be'gil Ein Sof. But once Torah is that way, then Torah is called Torah Oir. Anyway, he may add more to this as we go along. We'll see what he says. I would also just tell you, you're using the word Noga B'Had Tzimtzum. I would just tell you, don't use that expression if you don't mind. Because Noga B'Had Tzimtzum is a particular level regarding the Igul HaGodel and the Shima, the Eisis HaRishimu. He has not used explicitly, he did not use that term very deliberately, because Noga B'Had Tzimtzum is another sugya, lower levels. He's not talking about necessarily Oir Ein Sof. Even though in Hebrew you could use Noga means it affected, but the word Noga B'Had Tzimtzum Chassidus is usually reserved for a different discussion. Just pointing that out.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. But didn't he earlier talk about that? And forgive me for not having exact Hebrew language, but didn't he say that the Torah Or is a type of light that's not affected by the Tzimtzum?
But he doesn't use the word Noga. Noga is a particular word used in Chassidus for a particular subject matter.
I see.
He didn't use the word Noga. So in Hebrew, yeah, you can use it in Hebrew loosely, but those that learn Chassidus, when you hear Noga B'Had Tzimtzum, I right away know what it's referring to. It's a particular level that is discussed. That's all. It's just an expression.
Grammatical thing, yeah, addiction. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah. Okay, so he says like this. So now he says, so Torah is the bittul of Torah. Oi, b'chinas bittul dema ba'anova v'shiflus. Now he's talking about the anova, the humility of the person, and namely Moshe, and chen oni v'shof fral ruach kai gavna. So continuing on, ad to the point, shekol hakorev kamei yeser b'bittul dema b'tachlis. Let me read it again. Ad shekol hakorev kamei yeser b'bittul dema b'tachlis. That which is closer before God, in other words, the closer you get to the source, the more bittul is experienced. So this is an additional point in this discussion, because he's saying the only place that you can have an expression, what he called that less machshavet tfisa beklal, ein shay rag b'chinas ma be'etzem, only something that is completely bottle, does not have any substance, any sense of self, can be a channel for this level. So he's adding that, and the closer something gets to the source, the more bottle it is. Kamesha Kosav, like it says in Zayar, Tikkun Zayar, I think. Tafila Tzach talks about Keser. It says Keser, Iu Keser. It's an expression we've learned a number of times. So Kes is considered to be a very high level, called Tzach. Tzach is a very refined and a very subtle level, and yet Uchamhu, it's dark. Ucham is from the word dark or choshech or black. Dark and blackened, Kodam Ilis Ilis, in the presence of, as it stands before the cause of all causes. The Ilis is the cause of causes. So in other words, the interesting thing is that a very high level entity on its own, let's say take a student who became a master teacher, and he has many students of his own. So when he's with the students, he is the ultimate gili. But if he when he returns and stands in the presence of his teacher, the exact opposite happens. He becomes completely lost, completely bottled, is not tefus mokim before his great teacher. So the closer he is to the source, that very great entity becomes more bottled. Like we talk about, let's say, the light of a candle, shraga b'tir mai ahana, sharga b'tir mai ahana, a candle in the light of the sun. So in a dark room, a candle is a powerful light. But what is a candle when it's in the light of the sun? It actually is a darker state. It becomes dark because its light is not as strong as sunlight. So bottom line is, he's saying here, in addition to the point that he made, that Bittul is the keli, I don't want to use the word keli, Bittul is the way you manifest and draw down the Ayin Amiti, Yesh Amiti, this higher level, what he called, Ayin Amiti, Yesh Amiti, the level of Las Machshavet Tfisa Beklal. He's saying, so Moshe, who was an Anav, was able to draw that, and every Ani, or person who feels lowly by themselves, Acha Korav Kameh, to the point that whoever is closer to him is Yeser Bebitl Dema Betachlis. Like he brings a proof here from Erzach Uchamhu Legabi Ilis HaIlis. Now, my initial reaction when I read this is, it poses a question in my mind, at least. I'm just thinking out loud here, because why is this so relevant here? Here you want to say the opposite. You don't want to say it's an entity, and only because it comes close to its source, it loses itself and is dark. It's fundamentally bottled. That's the whole point here. Since it's fundamentally bottled, period, that's why it draws down from the higher source. Why are you bringing that? Why is it relevant whether you're close? If Moshe Rabbeinu was not close to Hashem, he's standing on his own, he's still an Onav, Mukala Adam. So why is it relevant that it's in the face of the source? Unless he's not really talking about two states, he's just making that point, that something that is standing near the source is going to be in a state of complete bittul. I have to think it through a bit more. But I'm just thinking out loud, what is he coming to add with this statement? The closer you are, the more bittul there is. Here it's really
And
coming to
if
say the
clarity-
opposite, that the more bittul there is, the more you're able to be close. So maybe that's the point. It's interdependent. The more bottle you are, the closer you can be to draw to that level of elokus, because when you get closer to it, you lose yourself. That's probably what he's saying here.
That
Right.
makes sense. Maybe
Yeah.
he's also distinguishing from Yesh Amiti. He's saying it originates with that, and in that sense, it's like one kula chad. But he's saying if you really want to measure it up, stack it up against the ultimate source, it's like it's dark. I don't know.
No, I don't think he's distinguishing between Ayin and Yesh or Amiti. That's not what he's saying. Here he's just simply saying that something closer it is to the source,
The
the
more
more
bittul
bottle
it
it
has.
is. Yeah. Okay. Shlomo, you wanted to say something? Okay.
No, I said that the way that you finalized it, this is the pshat. I don't see any question in this.
No, I agree. I'm not really posing a question. I was just thinking out loud how it's just a juxtaposition here. It sounds like that's the pshat. Yeah. And now he continues in explaining this. He says, Ke'inyan Yira Bereishis. Okay, Yira Bereishis. So let me explain what Yira Bereishis is. Bereishis means shame, busha, the word busha. So there are many levels of so-called reverence of God. You know, there's the lower levels, Yira Tata, there's Yira Sritzua, Yira Sa'enish. You know, a person has fear of being punished. There's Yira Ilah, the Yira that comes not from any fear of punishment, but just the mere fact that you stand in awe of God. Yira's Bereishis is considered one of the highest levels of Yira, maybe the highest even, which means you stand in a sense of complete shame. So in other words, you could have all the qualities of milas, but then you suddenly stand before your teacher and you don't exactly stand with any pride. Remember, I'm not talking about unhealthy shame here now. We're not talking about anything denigrating or humiliating. We're talking about a shame of you think you've achieved much, and then suddenly you stand before the master and you realize. So it's really a very deep level of bittul. He brings it in Tanya. It's the bittul that when you stand close to the source, it's what you feel. Like a person who's accomplished a lot in their life, and then they come to their master who taught them. So there's a certain element of, there's a story that Rebbe Rashab, when he became Rebbe, he was young. He was born in Tafresh Kafal. He became Rebbe in Mem Gimel. He was 22 years old. Officially, he didn't assume leadership till 10 years later, but he was already considered Rebbe. So he used to travel to Europe. He came, and he loved to travel anonymously. Didn't want anyone to know who he was. Even in later years, when he would travel with his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he would tell the Frierdiker Rebbe not to say who he is. And sometimes they would actually give an aliyah, Shabbos, to the Frierdiker Rebbe, because they didn't know that this was the Rebbe, his father. To the point, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in his diary, you can imagine how embarrassed I was. I'm getting aliyah, and my father's standing there in the corner. But his father didn't want anyone to know who he was. So anyway, it was right after the Stalkus, the passing of the Rebbe Marash in Tafresh Mem Gimel, 1843 or 1842, Yud Gimel Tishrei. And the Rebbe Rashab, a few months later, was traveling to Europe. I think it was Germany or France. Anyway, he came into a shul, or maybe even Vienna, not sure. He came into a shul, either weekday or Shabbos, and someone went over and said, Shalom Aleichem. From Vana Kum Ta'id, where does a Jew come from? Like, where are you coming from? He said, from Lubavitch. Oh, they said, we hear that in Lubavitch, there's a new Rebbe. A new Rebbe, he's young, but they say he's a tremendous Gaon, Talmid Chacham, Yerushalayim, all the qualities. Is it true? They're asking the Rebbe Rashab about himself. Is it true that about all the qualities, all the virtues, and the accolades that people are saying about him? So the Rebbe Rashab responded. He said, "Aber kommt nicht zum Taten," but he's not comparable to his father. That's how he responded. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He said, but he can't compare him to his father. So that's an example of Yiras Bereishis. It's not in any way negating the qualities that he had. It was saying, but you talk about compared to my father, it's like a candle in this. It didn't say that expression, a candle in the sun. But I just wanted to give an example of Utterl Bittul. It's almost like you feel complete headed tfisus mokim, which is in Aveda, the expression of Ertzach Uchamhu, that's the Aveda, that Keser, as high as it is, and it's one of the highest levels. It's Ein Sof according to some opinions. And it is definitely higher than Chochmah and Bina and Das. Compared to Chochmah, Keser is Ayin. The exact opposite. It's Bittul. It's completely mysterious. And yet, Kodem Ilus Ilus, Keser, when it stands in the face of of cause of causes, Uchamhu. It completely darkens. It's completely dark, as if it doesn't have any, not it doesn't have light. It's like darkness itself in face of its source. That's how Shalei Be'erech it is. There's an expression in the Arizal, Chassidus brings it, that Yesh Mishe'en Arech Atzilus Legabe Asiya is Ein Arech Keser Legabe Ein Sof. Or Yesh Mishe'en Arech Atzilus. In other words, Keser's distance from Ein Sof is far more than Keser's distance from the lower levels. So point being is...
Huh? I think the Ramak said it.
That Ramak says it, correct. It's brought in Teda Eir and in the Posach Eliyahu, yeah. But point being is, that's Utterl Bittul. And then he brings one more thing. The Kol Neherin Mischashchon Kamei. All the lights, all the bright lights, all Neherin is Eir, all the Eiris are darkened before him. Essentially the same idea, Uchamhu Kodem Ilus Elis. That's Utterl Bittul, that all the light gets darkened when it's in that state. So this is what he's talking about, is this level, the closer you get to that, the complete bittul of it, which also explains the element of it being, it's in it is Sheda, the ultimate Ein Sof. Okay. I'm going to stop here by the parentheses. There's more to talk about. I see there's a nice parenthesis. Okay. Good stuff.
It's not exactly the same story, but one time when the Rebbe Rashab was, I think, in Vienna area, he went to a shul of Pramishlan. Nobody knew who he is, so one of the Alter Chassidim started to talk to him about Tanya, and the Rebbe Rashab said a little different. So he told him, "Younger man, at times those folgen to Alter."
Yeah. Okay, it's a little different, yeah. Okay, any questions? Because I'm going to stop here before the parentheses by Mischashchon Kamei, which I see as a Zohar. Okay, interesting. Okay. So let's stop here. I'll stop the recording before Vizahu, page